We're joined now by the GM of the Blue Jays. Here's Ross Atkins. How you doing, Ross?
I'm doing all right, Brian. Thanks for having me on. What are you guys chatting about?
Well,
best athlete?
Yeah, we were we're doing this dumb hypothetical draft in like an hour.
It's really dumb. Like, don't even ask.
It's not. It's stupid.
It's perfect for the show.
But it's perfect for us. It lines up beautifully for us. And just how we were talking about before you came on, how one player in baseball cannot have the impact of a great quarterback or a superstar in the NBA. Case in point, Mike Trout, who is the best player in baseball, and I think he's only been in the playoffs one time, right? So it takes a full team, as I'm sure you're aware of.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, I think you said it well. You know, the difference in each sport is interesting and great to talk about, but in baseball, for sure, you know, one player alone, it's so difficult to do, to have just one carrying player be somebody that puts you over the top. So it's just, you know, it's the 25, 26-man roster now at 162. The impact that Mike Trout has is absolutely remarkable, but, you know, banking on that is probably not quite enough.
Ross, how excited are you about the draft you guys had?
Yeah, we feel good. We, you know, listen, like, you come out of every draft and you typically feel good because you're working off of your board. And we, some things fell our way, and we selected the players we were excited about. And, you know, this year's a little bit different, obviously. Our process, we tried to keep it as similar as possible, but you know, we weren't having as many peanut M&Ms and beef jerky as we normally do, as we're hunkered down for 30 days in one room with 30 guys. So a little bit different this year, but we felt good about our outcome. But listen, you guys know we really don't know until, you know, let's do this show again in 4 or 5 years.
Right. Well, and Austin Martin is a guy that. If you believe in the mock drafts and you believe on what everyone is saying from a consensus perspective, no one thought he'd be there at 5. And take us through, you know, the draft room. Take us inside your own head, I guess. Here, when you see him get past, you know, 2 and you get it past 3, and all of a sudden you're sitting there thinking, man, he might be there for us at 5. I mean, does the heart rate start to pick up a little bit? What was that feeling
concern
like?
when the guy slides like that?
Well, I guess it could go both ways, yeah.
Yeah, well, listen, like, we work through those. We've got, you know, especially this year, we had time on our hands. We weren't playing games every day. We had, you know, a lot of scenarios that we could consider, and we do that regardless. So we walk through that so that nothing does surprise us, and we're ready for the decision. And you know, especially when you're picking 5th, you have a pretty good sense for what could happen, and then with relationships in the game as well, you have a decent feel for what's going to occur. You're also talking to representation of the players, so it was by no means something that caught us off guard. And when he was there, you know, ultimately we were very, very pleased to be in a position to select him.
Ross, you mentioned representation. The well-known Scott Boras represents your first-round pick. There was talk that might have scared some teams away. What were your thoughts about the fact that you now have to negotiate with Scott Boras?
I mean, it's just that. You know, he is his representation, and we'll deal with him, and you know, absolutely fine with that, and work through that process, of course, beforehand. So we have a long working relationship with Scott and Mike Fiore and Scott Champerino, their crew on the amateur side. You know, had some discussion beforehand, during, and we'll continue that dialogue. So, you know, every situation is a little bit different. And in many cases, like in Nate Pearson's cases, we took that down to the wire as well, where, you know, it's not just as simple as the negotiation based on the slot. There's a lot of variables at play. We worked through those variables and felt good about the selection.
Have you ever moved away from a player because of an agent or a differing factor where you're just like, it's just not worth my time to be doing this?
No, you know, I think that would be a disservice to the Toronto Blue Jays, to the organization. You know, we're focused on acquiring talent, so we're not going to be moved away by representation. You know, acquisition cost is a different factor that you have to put into the equation. But certainly not going to be steered away by just someone that's representing a player.
With Ross Atkins, so Lacey and Meyer went right prior to you guys picking at 5, and we've had this conversation countless times over the past year and a half, how you guys have accumulated so much talent that'll play around the diamond. And a lot of that talent's already here with Vladdy and Bo and Cavan, et cetera. And you guys have placed an emphasis on accumulating arms, going out there and getting arms. You have Nate Pearson, who might be the best young arm outside of baseball right now. But take us through that. Like, Martin obviously was a guy that you love, and he was a guy that appears to be maybe the best contact hitter in all of the draft. But why another bat over an arm with such a prominent pick at 5?
Yeah, I mean, so at that point it was clear he was the best player to acquire. And there are times that you can break a tie with, if you have a preference for pitching versus position or just what that position is. But we try not to get into those positions because you can tend to regret them. Having said that, you still don't want to ignore how to best complement your group and where you are on the timeline. So we would much prefer it to be the situation where it's just a clear breaking tie scenario. We wouldn't want to look back on that because if you think about, just what's best for the organization, it's always about acquiring, the best teammates, the best people, the best players you can possibly acquire. Where we are it's interesting too, because I think a lot of people look at our group and think, yeah, they have a lot of good young position players and, they need pitching to complement that. And we're actually very top heavy. The majority of our prospect capital is at the top end of our system and ready to tap into the major leagues or come into the major leagues. And some of our position player talent is in Jordan Groshans, Alejandro Kirk is coming behind. So we feel actually very good about the pitching that's coming at the AA and AAA level, and some of it's already transitioned somewhat. It wasn't necessarily that we felt like we were going into the draft thinking we had to acquire pitching. And Austin Martin was just a clear cut above the other acquisition opportunities that we had at our selection.
With Ross Atkins, I'm sure you're not surprised to hear this, Ross, but we had Tim Corbin on yesterday, the head coach of Vanderbilt, and he's probably Austin's biggest fan. And we asked him, can you project how you feel his timeline's going to look in terms of getting to the majors? And he said he thinks he could play right now. Now, he's his guy. He's his coach in Vanderbilt. But this is a 21-year-old. This isn't some kid out of high school. Is it possible we could see him playing this summer for the Blue Jays?
Yeah, there's nothing more I want to do than get ahead of myself right now in a pandemic.
He's batting leadoff open game.
All right, okay.
Yeah,
we'll pencil him in. All right.
Good.
I can't wait to get ahead of myself. I'm dying to, but I'd rather partner with a player in that and make sure that we have the acquisition and start to work through that transition with the player before we start to project that. But you're right. And Tim Corbin, I love Tim Corbin. I think he has the best program in amateur baseball. It is absolutely remarkable what they have done. And we have a long-standing relationship with that organization. Gil Kim, Matt Bushman, who are here. We've drafted players from that organization and have the utmost respect for what they've done. I think when you look at the profile of Austin Martin and, think about a guy that has really high contact rates, incredible athleticism, has performed on a really high stage, has the reputation of liking the stage and liking the competition, not backing down from challenges, it gets easier to project that and gets easier to, think about that transition being a quick one. And frankly, Tim Corbin knows him better than we do. We haven't lived with him. We haven't been through that as many people, from the names I mentioned to Nate Murray and the many scouts that we had doing all of the background work and spending time on this selection. We feel like we know him well, but not as well as Tim does. And so that's really encouraging to hear.
All right.
Ross, who knows what will happen then in the fall? We'll watch out for first game, but it looks like you're going to have a 50 to 75 game season. Does the shortened season impact the organization's approach to this year?
Yeah, I mean, it will for sure because the rules will be different. Not the expectations, but
What are the expectations?
what we're up against. Right. Well, the expectations are just always to make sure we're sustaining the best possible situation for our organization and team. But the expectations are different when you're playing 162 versus 50.
Right.
What you have to do to get through a 162-game season, which is oftentimes a lot of the frustration. I don't want to get too long-winded on this front. Oftentimes a lot of the frustration about opening day and how we build our rosters and, it's just not about opening day sometimes. Oftentimes when you think about 162, you think about August versus March 31st, and that's a long way away. So anyway, but back to your question, once we know what the parameters are and what the rosters, we have a pretty good idea of what it's going to be, what the rules are going to be, what our depth looks like, and what we can potentially be tapping into from a depth perspective, and then also factoring in the continued development of some of our young players, and then what it means for taking players off of your roster. So if you're taking a player off of your roster for a 50-game season or a 75-game season, it's very different than taking a player off of your roster for a 162-game season. So you might be more, prone to consider at least not going with the minor league free agent or the more veteran type that has been there, done that, and protecting a player a little bit longer to give them exposure and making sure you have a little bit more rope with the young players and the young talent. So that's a long way of saying that I think that will be how we adjust in thinking about our depth, is making sure we're not sacrificing young talent, taking them off of our roster to get through the long haul of 162 because we might need someone who is more proven. But at the same time, please know that every game we're going into at this point, there's only one thing that we're thinking about, and it's winning.
Well, and that's what makes our whole existence right now so complicated, and there's so much uncertainty, and obviously the commissioners made it clear we're playing baseball. We don't know how many games, but we're going to play. And I think that is obviously something that's satisfying the masses. But from your perspective, I'm sure, and you're not alone, there'd be 29 other GMs thinking, okay, what are we going to do here with all of our players throughout the system, with all the uncertainty? So
yeah, no question.
How do you figure that out, Ross? Is there anything you can do as an organization that can make sure even the guys who aren't going to be on the roster playing ball games maybe this summer can keep their development from being stunted maybe more than it already has been?
Yeah, I mean, like Brian, if I had a great answer for you there, I'd be lying to you. It's a pandemic, right? And we don't have the face-to-face with as many players as we'd like. It's actually it's either via Zoom or the very small group that we actually have in Dunedin right now because of the border issue. We don't have any players in Toronto, so we are doing everything we can to stay in touch, provide resources, and connect and engage. But creating competition is very difficult, and that is a very important part of development. So, hopefully we'll get to that point where we have more avenues to do that, but right now we just don't. So we're thinking about education. We're thinking about growth in different ways, mostly on the human and just education side and how we can stay engaged and connected. But, man, we need to get back to playing.
Yeah, and again, hopefully that's sooner rather than later. But as you know, there's a lot going on in the world with COVID-19, with Black Lives Matter and the protests happening throughout both countries, south of the border and north of the border. And I know the GMs throughout baseball have all collectively decided to get involved, yourself included. Can you take us through how you're getting involved and how you're trying to help?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a really powerful initiative. We were on the phone on Sunday at noon with the 30 GMs. It came together very quickly with the decision to, to make a statement. And the first way to do that is with action and money. But I think what we need to be thinking about is well beyond the contributions and our donations, which were well over $1 million, matched by Major League Baseball, matched by owners. But the initiative began with personal donations from the 30 heads of baseball operations across the game, and that was powerful just to be a part of, because it literally was a matter of minutes that all of us decided that it made sense to do this. And I think what it ultimately does is it causes us to all think about how we can make a difference and how we can improve upon an existence to, hopefully make things better for those that just are discriminated upon and don't have the same opportunities that all should.
Well, yeah, I think that's a great step forward, and I think we're all, sharing that mentality, and we look forward to seeing where you guys all take it as a game, as a sport, and we look forward to getting everyone back, into spring training, whatever we're going to call it, when everyone gets back together again and starts playing again, hopefully sooner rather than later. Always appreciate your time. We'll do it again soon. Thank you, Ross.
All right, Brian, tell the grappler I voted for Mahomes.